Russia sent tankers to save Crimea from a fuel shortage. It turned them into targets instead. 21 of them burned in a single night. This is the story of how Russia's own emergency order created the biggest naval disaster of the war, and why the Kremlin cannot undo it. Today's video explains the fuel war, how it started, why one narrow strait became the choke point of an entire military machine, and why Vladimir Putin, even now, even with his own advisors begging him to stop, has decided to escalate instead. Welcome back. Let's start with the strait, because everything else follows from it. The Kerch Strait connects the Sea of Azov to the Black Sea. It is narrow. It has one bridge crossing it, and only one or two ports on the Crimean side able to handle a tanker at a time. That geography used to be a footnote. This month, it became a trap. Crimea was running out of fuel. Ukrainian strikes on refineries and pipelines had already choked the peninsula's supply, and Moscow needed a fast fix. So the Kremlin ordered dozens of Volganev-class tankers, old Soviet-built vessels, each capable of carrying about 7,000 tons of fuel, to converge from depots along the Don River and rush supplies south. The problem was speed versus capacity. Tankers arrived faster than the ports could process them. With nowhere to unload, they had to anchor and wait, lined up stationary on the open water north of the strait. A logistics shortcut turned an entire fleet into a parking lot of sitting targets. Ukraine's drone forces did not need to search for them. They were already there. In a single night, Ukrainian forces struck 21 tankers, 4 tugboats, 2 dry cargo ships, and a support vessel. 73 confirmed hits according to Ukraine's Unmanned Systems Command. Russian border authorities responded by suspending all new applications to pass through the Kerch Strait. For the first time since the war began, the passage connecting the Sea of Azov to the Black Sea effectively closed. And Ukraine's strike doctrine here is deliberately narrow. Crews targeting loaded tankers generally avoid the fuel holds themselves, aiming instead at the bridge and steering systems, enough to disable the ship without triggering a large-scale environmental spill in shared waters. Russia is then permitted, in effect, to tow the wrecks back to Kerch, but the port has nowhere near enough repair capacity to fix them. The cargo gets delivered once, the ship never sails again. Roughly 100 Volganev tankers remain in service. In under a week, close to half of that fleet was damaged or destroyed. The damage did not stop at the water. On the opposite side of the strait, in Russia's Krasnodar region, drones hit a major refinery and the port terminals at Taganrog, the facility that loads much of Crimea's fuel onto those same tankers in the first place. Fires broke out at 2 fuel depots and inside the Taganrog seaport. Both the port of Azov and the port of Taganrog were shut down because of the blazes. Trucks loaded with wheat bound for export sat stranded at the docks, unable to move. One person was reportedly killed in the strikes on vessels moored in Taganrog Bay, according to Russian authorities. So this was never only about ships. It was the loading terminal, the depots feeding it, and the strait leading out of it. 3 links in the same chain, hit within the same window of days. Now widen the picture, because Kerch was not an isolated operation. It was the visible edge of a much larger campaign. Days earlier, Ukrainian long-range drones reached Omsk, Russia's largest oil refinery, more than 2,500 kilometers from the front line, deep in Siberia. It had never been hit before. Estonian military intelligence assessed that the strike could directly affect the operational readiness of the Russian Air Force, since Omsk supplies a significant share of the country's aviation fuel. The head of Estonia's Defense Intelligence Service called it evidence that Ukraine's long-range strike capability keeps expanding, and proof that Russia cannot defend its key territories with the air defenses it currently has. Put the 2 operations together, Omsk and Kerch, and the strategy becomes obvious. Ukraine is not trying to win a single battle. It is trying to sever every link in Russia's fuel supply chain at once. The refineries that produce it, the ports that ship it, and the strait that connects them. There is a reason this works. Russia's fuel network was built for a country that controlled its own skies over its own territory, moving product from wells in Siberia to refineries, then to depots, then to the front, without ever expecting any of those links to be under threat thousands of kilometers from a battlefield. Ukraine's long-range drones broke that assumption once, at Omsk. Every strike since has been testing how far the break extends. The answer so far is further than Moscow planned for. The military blogger Maxim Kalashnikov, writing from inside Russia, described what is unfolding as a fuel Tsushima, a reference to the 1905 naval disaster that helped trigger the collapse of Tsarist Russia. He warned that continued strikes on pumping stations and pipelines could soon make even a basic reservist mobilization impossible, because none of it works without fuel. And this is where the politics catch up with the logistics. Reuters reported, citing 3 sources close to the Kremlin, that Putin's own advisors proposed freezing the war along the current front line, a compromise designed to stabilize the country before the fuel crisis spirals further. Putin rejected it. According to the sources, he rebuked the group and remains fixed on capturing the rest of Donbass outright, despite Russian forces slowing on that front this year. One source who regularly meets with the president described a high probability of escalation in the coming months rather than negotiations. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, asked to respond, said Russia remains ready for a peaceful resolution, but insisted Moscow has enough capability to continue what it still calls its special military operation. 2 claims that do not sit easily side by side, while tankers burn in the Sea of Azov and a refinery smolders in Siberia. There is one more thread worth pulling. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky said this week that China had responded to Russian nuclear rhetoric in what he described as an ultimatum, telling Moscow, through diplomatic channels around the NATO summit in Ankara, that any use of nuclear weapons was not up for discussion. That claim comes from Zelensky, not from Beijing directly, and it has not been independently confirmed by Chinese officials, but it fits a pattern. China depends on the current balance of power in East Asia. A Russian nuclear strike would risk exactly the kind of regional rearmament Beijing has spent decades trying to prevent. None of this guarantees a quick collapse. Russia is a large country with reserves, alternative routes, and partners willing to look the other way. But every workaround now costs more, moves slower, and covers less ground than it did a month ago. That is what a fuel war looks like from the inside, not a single dramatic failure, but 1,000 small ones, stacking faster than they can be fixed. So here is where the fuel war actually stands. Crimea's supply line runs through a strait so narrow that Ukraine can watch it. Russia's largest refinery, thousands of kilometers from any front, is no longer out of reach. Putin's own advisors think the war needs to pause. Putin has said no. The tankers are still burning in Kirk. The refinery in Omsk is still not fully repaired. And the next convoy, because there will be a next convoy, has nowhere else to go.